Hello and welcome to Talk the Thrones, the Ringers Game of Thrones after show. This is Jason Concepcion, that is Mallory Rubin. My name is Chris Ryan, and now our watch has ended. Game of Thrones wraps up with a, I'm sure to be divisive, emotional, dramatic, thrilling series finale. We are gonna help you break it all down. We'll break down the last episode this last season and probably try to give you some context for the series itself. As always, we are coming to you on Twitter, so if you want to hit us up, it's hashtag #TalkTheThrones for questions, eulogies, concerns, theories, projections into what a Bran the Broken administration might look like in Westeros.
What's
we
the
can
platform?
only dream. Guys, usually we start with Wildfire moments, which is what everybody is talking about, but I would be remiss now that we're actually at the end of this amazing, amazing journey, and for whatever anybody has said about season 8, it is still going to be regarded as one of the truly pivotal television shows in TV history. What did you guys think of the finale? Jason, I'll start with you.
Bran the Broken, can we get our king like a better moniker?
You don't think that's
like we're just gonna bust on this guy all the time?
Yeah.
A lot of highs, a lot of lows. Dany's death was incredibly affecting and emotional, even though you could feel it coming. And man, I would love to know what happens after this story when Bran dies. Like what happens to the realm?
They just do what Tyrion said while he was in chains and manacles.
Mallory, what were some of your thoughts?
Ice and fire, man, honestly.
Yeah.
In that sense, and if only in that sense, a fitting conclusion. I thought that the first 40 minutes through Dany's death were like pretty spectacular, if not always. There were still moments where you could feel what the condensed pace of the final couple seasons had led us toward. Moments like the Jon-Tyrion conversation where a lot of explaining how we got there had to happen along with explaining their feelings. But I still was totally gripped for those first 40 minutes and really mourning the end, not only of the lives of a certain character that I love, but of this time together and the story together. I thought that the second half of the episode was challenging.
Yes. I thought it was a microcosm for the season, the last two seasons.
Yes.
It was like the visual moments, the dramatic moments, absolutely enthralling, and then fast forward, like it was like watching it on fast forward.
Yeah, the montage toward the very end of the episode, I enjoyed quite a bit of that a lot. Yes. Obviously, seeing Jon and Ghost.
Somebody at the channel.
Let's just talk about what an easy mark Mallory Rubin is.
Oh my God.
Is like this. I can't believe they're doing this. This is Ghost. Great.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Someone's Rotten Tomatoes are for sale. Yeah.
We'll peek behind the curtain.
I didn't mean to interrupt though. Any other thoughts about the episode itself?
We'll go through all of the beats.
We'll
I think certain plot lines were really successful, and certain plot lines are things that we will have to grapple with and choose to accept or not accept, and that's part of being a fan of the story, and that's fine. I don't think that everybody has to feel the same way about the ending or about any part of it. I really, really wish that we had had more time. I think that the moment, the screen going black between the halves of the episode.
Yes.
I have never felt the need for more time as badly as I did in the few moments that followed that, when we were at the Dragon Pit watching the future of the realm, the history of this world and these people unfold in the span of a moment when we didn't really have the luxury of understanding how they got there.
Yeah, it turns out Veep didn't end last week. We had one more episode. Let's talk about this episode from perspective of what other people are talking about. This is our Wildfire moments, and this is what the biggest takeaways of the episode are. And I guess for me,
what was yours?
I guess what I would say is I would start with, there's so many different ones, but I guess I would go with Jon's fate, which is something that you had sort of talked about over the last couple of weeks. You had certainly convinced me that Jon's fate lay in the north, but it was sort of the good and the bad about that. On one hand, I thought it was really poetic and fitting, and he's always been this kind of like almost outsider Western character who was always going to be somewhat isolated from the society he wanted to protect. And on the other hand, so what happens if they had been like, yeah, we're not going to do that? Like the Unsullied being like, we need justice here. You got to send Jon to the wall. And they were like, we just lost that argument. With who?
They laid
who did
down,
you lose the argument
they
with?
laid down
Grey Worm
incredibly
who
easy
bounced?
for that.
Like, like,
why were they having the argument in that fashion in the first place? Yeah. Like, at some point, trying to figure out the logic of the conclusion is impossible if we don't understand the logic of the premise.
Yes.
Right. So that's tough. That said, I think Jon's fate was, in many ways, the most powerful part of the episode.
Yeah,
Not pitch perfect moment to moment, but
it made sense.
So let me ask
with
the
character.
two of you this, though.
Sure.
Was his lineage at all significant then, at the end of the series? Like, all this stuff that we had tied up in him being a Targaryen, of him finding out his parentage, of him grappling with his identity, and what that would mean for everybody else.
I mean, essentially they used it as a dramatic device to push Dany over the edge. That's what the import of it was. I don't quite... The problems that Dany had with Jon's lineage and that becoming known, which is he could become a catspaw to people who were looking to their own route to power, who would say, Jon, you should be king.
Yeah.
I'm going to support you to do that, and they would then ride his coattails to power. That still exists. He's alive.
Yeah.
Up in the north. An unspoken thing about this ending is how pissed the rest of the realm must be. The Starks basically control Westeros. You can talk about the Six Kingdoms thing all you want.
right.
Bran is king.
Right.
Sansa is queen of an independent kingdom. They basically let Jon
Jon's
off.
in the far north, yeah.
And he's still a half Targaryen. They could bring him back at any time. The rest of the realm would be like, wait a second. So we got rid of the Targaryens, but now the Starks run everything? The rest of the realm is going to be pretty pissed about this.
I stand for the Stark-heavy ending because, in many ways, it has always felt like a story that was about the Starks, and that was always the thing about Jon's parentage that felt like a little bit existentially confusing as a consumer of the story was, well, okay, was it actually just a story about the Targaryens? I thought it was about the Starks. You know, George R. R. Martin, the creator of the story, has said that the scene where the Stark children find the direwolves was the first thing he thought of. That was how this entire world opened up for him, that moment in the North. And so I think seeing Sansa do what Robb ultimately couldn't do, couldn't hold on to, and say the North is a free and independent kingdom. To see Jon, I want to talk about Jon and answer your question and talk about that a lot more throughout the course of this time together here. You know, but to see him, where did Tormund say he belonged? The real North. Well, that's where he is. To see Arya head west, can she be the first to bring an answer back to what's west of Westeros? The Bran thing, very fraught, obviously, as we'll discuss. That feels right, I think, to your specific question about, well, did his parentage matter? I think it did, but also, again, is a little bit of the victim of the compressed time frame. Because to me, it was never, and again, this is how I felt about it. It doesn't mean that's how other people felt about it, and that's fine. To me, it was less a question of the logistics of the ultimate politics of the show and more about identity and who Jon thought he was and how he viewed his life and how his siblings felt about him. That's why I felt so cheated when we didn't get to see Sansa and Arya a couple episodes ago receive that information. Because
nor did we get to see that small council that was pretty much convened to elect the new king discuss at all that Jon was by all like metrics the rightful heir to the throne.
Right.
Whether he is a Kingslayer or Queenslayer or not.
So this is the thing that I'm stuck on. While I liked where Jon ended up and thought that felt fitting, I really think he needed to make that choice.
Yeah, see,
he needed to abdicate his claim.
This is the problem I have with it as well. Like, the reluctant hero, that's Jon through and through.
Absolutely.
I love it.
And the
fact that he does
as
it
well, yeah.
But there comes a point where it's like, man, Jon really got talked into a lot of stuff. Tyrion talked him into killing Dany, basically. Sansa talked him into taking back Winterfell. At a certain point, he needed to have his own thoughts on these matters, and he kind of didn't. He was certainly happy to go north, clearly. But like at the end there, for him to be saying, did I do the right thing? What am I doing? Like, was that okay, everything I did? Like, I agree with Mal. Like, he needed to abdicate, and he needed to know that what he did was the correct thing.
Okay, so one of the Wildfire moments is Jon's fate. What's your Wildfire moment?
Directly tied to that.
Yeah.
Jon Snow killing Daenerys Targaryen.
It's sort of weird to say.
Let that just go through your ears for a second. I think that it's one of those moments in a book or a show or a movie or anything in your real life where even though you spent a lot of time thinking about whether it could happen and anticipating it, And actually getting to the point where you thought it would, it was still astonishing that it actually happened.
Yeah.
Like, I was shaking, gripping onto Jason for dear life, crying. I thought that the Dany aspect of that I almost want to separate, because I think discussing how they got Dany to that point again is a worthwhile separate.
We can hit that in Raven Scroll,
yes. The Jon side of it specifically, and I was glad, despite the overly self-referential nature of the season, that they called out Aemon, Maester Aemon, and the love is the death of duty quote that we've talked about here on Talk of Thrones and on Binge Mode and everywhere all season long. That's a season 1 quote. That's a season 1 conversation, and that has always been so core to Jon's identity and Jon's idea. What were the other parts of that conversation later on? And there are a million we can run through tonight, but sooner or later in every man's life, there comes a day when it is not easy, a day when he must choose. Jon had to choose. I'm really glad we got that.
Yeah. Okay, so that's Mal's Wildfire moment. What was yours, Jason?
The election of King Bran the Broken, baby. Let's go.
The election of the king.
Let's go.
The election of the king.
I love it.
Okay.
Let me just, first of all, the absolute stones on Tyrion Lannister.
Yeah.
In manacles. My dude in manacles, grizzled, been in jail for weeks.
At the bottom of a tribe at Tribal, talking his way out of it.
No one knows.
While
Rick
is looking
Devins
at
of Game of Thrones.
My dude is locked up, and
No
he's
more
just
immunity
like,
idols.
and he's just like gets on a roll, and he's just like
Made a fake idol?
Let me tell you something.
Trick the jury.
For all the time, thousands of years, kings and queens of Westeros gonna be named right here. My dude is in chains, and they're just like, yes, I'm feeling, and he talked them into it. Incredible.
Yeah.
Stop letting it, wild in retrospect that they let Jon go in and talk to Tyrion. Like, just stop letting people talk to him.
What's the corrections department doing?
I know, but it's truly a crazy wild development to have Bran, a character who was jettisoned for the show for a season, now be king. Remember when Tyrion was very, very concerned about the succession with Dany? How we're going to make sure, it's one thing to elect a ruler or to have a ruler ascend to the throne. Stability. How do we make sure that that government maintains itself? Those questions are very, very present with Bran, who cannot father children, and now Tyrion was like, good.
Well, I want to get to the idea of whether or not they answered the right questions and let the right questions dangle. Okay, so we're going to get to Raven Scroll. We'll go through the entire episode. Before we do, let's just hit Winds of Twitter, where we see what other folks are saying out there on Twitter. Hashtag Talk the Thrones if you want to reach out to me, Mal, or Jason over here at Talk the Thrones. And the one we got here is from Pedro Pascal.
Yeah.
Shut up, it was perfect. Hashtag Game of Thrones.
I agree. Narcos was very good.
Yeah, it's dope. I heard
Triple
the Mandalorian is
Triple Frontier was
fire. Let's go for the Raven
Can we
Scroll.
talk about that for a second?
About Pedro Pascal?
Yeah, because I actually think it's obviously the discourse has been fraught in the fandom the past couple weeks.
Yeah.
And I do think that it's worth just taking a moment to say out loud, which we've done a lot, but should do again, what an astonishing achievement this was. Like,
Absolutely.
the people who made this should, of course, be very proud. The fact that the actors and the people who are involved with the show feel compelled to come out and defend the work is, like, a little sad. It's sad that it got to the point, because I think one of the things that's been really special about Game of Thrones is that it brought a lot of people together. And, like, I don't mean to sound like a naive fool who thinks that it's all, like, kumbaya all the time. Obviously, that specifically is not what Game of Thrones was about in any way. But people worked really hard on it and made something that, whatever it is that we're all saying, got all these people to come together every Sunday night and talk about the same thing. That's incredible, and I will miss that part of it very much.
Of course. I mean, there's something very sad, and also it gets clouded by the amount that we're talking about it and theorizing about it and maybe Monday morning quarterbacking it, that it was able to support this level of conversation in the first place is really admirable. And also, like, even in this episode, even in previous episodes from season 8, like, I already in my mind, I'm like, season 8 was actually pretty good. You know, I mean, I know.
Are you?
No, and I am in the sense that I'm like, there's ways in which you can construct season 8 where you're like, damn, that was pretty incredible. I can't believe I saw that and that and that. And like, the Bells, Winterfell, like, I'll be like, those were incredible achievements for a long, long time. Let's go through this final episode, this series finale of Game of Thrones in the Raven Scroll, where we're just gonna go through scene by scene. And honestly, this will be a little bit more loosey-goosey because there weren't actually that many scenes in this episode. You had King's Landing, the battlefield. We're obviously seeing the wreckage and the leftovers of Dany's reign of fire, essentially.
I had an asthma attack just watching those scenes.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And I thought the imagery of the ash was very profound, and the idea
great.
of winter is coming has been this slogan for the show, and this fear in the show this entire time. And it turns out that the danger was right in front of them the whole time, although obviously not always in that position. But what did you think of the sort of aftermath of Dany's attack?
I thought it was astonishing. Yeah. I mean, it was incredible. The best moments of last week's episode were the moments where we were either in the thick of a fight we cared about, like Clegane Bowl, or on the ground with Arya, seeing the carnage. And to see the effects of that, to right away remember that it happened, that it was as bad as we thought, that those buildings were destroyed, that those people were killed. It was like walking through, other people have made this comparison online, I think it's very apt. It was like walking through Guernica, you know, like seeing yourself in the middle of war. Like that's not, and we'll get to Dany and her arriving triumphant in a minute, but you walk through that street on the way to her before you get to her so that you cannot let yourself as a viewer off the hook either.
It's a crucial question that I think Jon had asked Dany, which is like, have you been down there?
Right, like that's not breaking the wheel, that's Slaughterhouse 5.
Oh, sure. Yeah. In the next scene, we get to see Tyrion gets a little bit of closure. Now, first, we obviously Grey Worm is executing Lannister soldiers, and he has a disagreement with Jon. And Grey Worm's character has sort of fully gone over to this.
Right.
I am like the strong arm of the queen, and like whatever she says goes. And frankly, I'm down with it because these people took away the one thing I loved in this world.
We should not lose sight of the fact that when Dany first procured the Unsullied in Astapor back in season 3, Jorah said to her, "There's a beast in every man and it stirs when you put a sword in his hand." Then went on to say something about the Unsullied as a justification. He said, "They do not rape, they do not put cities to the sword unless they're ordered to do so." Well, they put the city to the sword.
Yeah.
And I think that this is one of the plot lines, even though it feels a little small maybe compared to all of the other characters who we're more invested in, but Grey Worm is an interesting case study for what the show's message on love actually is. Because I think that with a lot of characters for a long time we thought, and like candidly, like I'll fess up, maybe I just have read Harry Potter too recently and I'm like, that's the way I think about it, and then that was never what Thrones was trying to say, and that's fine, that's like my cross to bear. But there were a lot of moments where we thought, okay, maybe love can unlock something for you. You know, Jon and Ygritte, and how it changed how he thought about the entire world and the different people in the world. And then you look at something like Grey Worm and it's like, well, what's the message? You love somebody and you lose somebody and you completely lose your sense of morality and what is right and wrong. Like, there were a lot of characters who fell into that bucket. Even thinking back last couple episodes ago to Tyrion and Varys talking, and Tyrion's line in essence was like, well, so all this happened just because Robert Baratheon loved someone who didn't love him back, huh? Right. There were a lot of season 8 moments where the message on love was, actually, it's not what you want. And that gets back to like, who is the mouthpiece for the moral of the show? Like, Ramses, if you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention. Well, who have we heard talk about love in that fashion the whole time? Cersei. You know, it was what she said to Sansa in season 2. The more people you love, the weaker you are. Kind of a bummer.
It is a little bit of a bummer that the people who appear to so succinctly underline the basic philosophy of the show end up being Cersei Lannister and Ramsay.
Yeah.
Like, that's the people who got it right.
I've been trying to articulate this over the last few weeks, like in various places, just like talking about it, but I almost feel like the show in some ways, or the story in some ways, was a victim of the affection that we had for some of the characters and actors playing the characters. In some ways, just because like I think you almost want better things for people than the story is showing you are available.
Yeah.
And it's like I couldn't even help but get mad on behalf of, I guess, Kit Harington, who's got a great life. But I was almost just like, God damn it, I really wanted this guy to like have like more than Tormund and a one-year dog.
Like rich, handsome, and married to Rose Leslie and totally fine.
Good. Yeah, he's awesome.
Legitimate Scottish royalty now. I mean, I understand that feeling. I'm the guy who used to like read Avengers comics and be like, man, I love it when they're just hanging out by the pool and like playing baseball and stuff and not fighting. Like, that's the stuff I liked. At the same time, I think the thing that, what we really appreciate about this story over time is just like the peril that it puts the characters we love and the tough choices it makes them make. Those are the things we remember. So I totally understand that feeling. Like it's weird to watch these characters go beyond us into like a fate which we don't always vibe with or totally understand.
Because you've spent so much time with these people, and in some ways, you kind of like, I think that this is a criticism that gets lobbed at a lot of franchises right now, like whether it's Star Wars or Marvel, where it's like, well, you can't actually let go of these people because people just have built up too much a reservoir of like affection for them. And sometimes I'm like, for a story like Game of Thrones, where the lesson, so to speak, for lack of a better term, is maybe love is your Achilles heel or whatever, like that winds up almost like clouding your vision of watching it.
I agree, and I agree with what you're saying, and I also disagree with it as a kind of, I don't know, not excuse, but as a kind of like, there's every TV show in the world wants the problems that Game of Thrones has.
That's a really good way of putting
Wants
it.
millions of people around the globe to care fervently what happens to its characters. Wants millions of people around the globe to be constantly theorizing.
NCIS is like, what about us?
Like, these are the problems that every TV show wants. So, on the one hand, yes, no piece of fiction is built to withstand, especially TV shows, built to withstand this kind of love and affection and attention. On the other hand, like, kind of deal with it because these are great problems to have.
Well, I think I don't want to speak for you, but what I feel is you're saying that is like, it's not, okay, let's talk about Robb Stark for a second.
Sure.
A character like that. Did we love him? Well, sure, not in the way that we love Jon or Tyrion or people we spend more time with. Yes, exactly, it is. It absolutely is. And so I think that, like, I find myself thinking of the Jon, I think I'm gonna mention Ygritte as much as we've been mentioning like Ollie on binge mode. I'm just thinking about her a lot, and I'm thinking about their moment when they were kissing against the rock and talking about the future and sort of realizing, even though they couldn't admit it, that they were doomed. And she said, if we die, but first we'll live. And I think like part of what you're feeling, and a lot of people are feeling, is just that the fact that they might die was always there.
Yeah.
And we always understood that as people who were consuming this story. We always understood that painfully. It was almost something we couldn't escape. But we wanted to see them live first, and we wanted to understand how they were living and why they were living.
Yes.
And the pace of the last 2 seasons, I think, in some ways compromised that fundamental fact.
Well, to stick with Ravenscroll, I would almost point to Tyrion's discovery of his siblings in the rubble as a kind of signal of what I'm talking about, because there is a version of Game of Thrones where you do not find them. You do not get the closure, you do not, it's blocked off the way it looked when all those rocks fell. He doesn't get to say goodbye to them, he doesn't see the gold hand sticking out, and that was a really, really amazing moment and a really powerful piece of acting, but that is kind of what I'm talking about.
I also found that extremely powerful and emotional, and it left me thinking, wow, it reframed everything, all the mistakes that Tyrion has been making this whole time. I mean, it's clear that, it's too strong to say that he was committing multiple treasons throughout his time as Cersei's top advisor, but clearly was not the guy that you wanted to give you unvarnished advice in a war against his family. Just was not. Was not.
What did he say to Cat Stark all those many, many, many pages and chapters in the books ago when they were still thinking the dagger was his and that he had sent it after Bran? I never bet against my family. Like, all of the problems, all of the terrible history that he and Cersei in particular shared, and obviously he and Tywin shared, that little nugget, that ember of love was always there, and Dany identified it and called him out on it multiple times. I mean, in many ways—
He denied it every time.
Well, he didn't always. I mean, he said, yeah, I am trying to think like them because you have to think like your enemy. He tried to reframe it as them being his enemy, but it was always that they were on his mind.
I mean, that sounded good then. I think from the context of this ending, clearly was not quite the whole truth, and maybe he couldn't admit it to himself.
Yeah, that he somehow, so you're saying somehow, despite everything, still loved her.
Was clearly working for the interests of the House Lannister the entire time.
It was still his father's son.
I I don't know. I don't think that Tyrion loved Cersei in the way that we think of people loving siblings
I don't
or
think
other
he
people
has
in the
like
show.
a picture in his dashboard on her.
He loved her through Jaime's eyes, and he loved the idea that he could still save her and change her. Because I think that's...
She loved her children.
I'm
You
not
may have
sure
heard,
if you
you
know.
may have heard him.
Yeah,
You may have heard him
but
say
you know
that.
what? The thing is that seeing her body, maybe if it hadn't already, obviously like Dany liquefying a city does it, but she did surrender. She did try to give up the city. She did listen to Tyrion eventually. Maybe all was lost. Maybe she needed to see it in that extreme way, but she did. It was gonna happen, and maybe he's seeing her and he's like, "This is it." Like if this is the tragedy of what Daenerys is doing to people.
Absolutely, and I think it's another moment that is kind of like a microcosm for the end of the show as a whole, because it was, I agree with both of you, like incredibly emotional and powerful. I was sobbing watching it. It also was like, okay, what are we thinking about? What are we actually seeing? We are seeing Jaime and Cersei together, like in the womb.
Yes.
Back in the womb together, the womb of their death, their ambition crumbled around them. And it's like we have to always be reminded of where we started, and then we have to ask ourselves, well, what's the message? Again, I mean, I do think it's worth continuing to talk about what the message is, and it's probably something that we'll find clarity on over time and as we watch it more and process it. But literally, Jaime, a character who more than maybe any on the show represented an arc and the capacity for change, whether or not you think redemption is possible.
Yeah.
Choice and change.
Yeah.
Period. Like a basic
Character
fundamental
evolution.
pillars
Like you don't
of
have to look at
existence.
it. Yeah.
And he ended up not only back with Cersei, but literally back to the beginning of where he started, wrapped up with her as one. Like, as powerful and beautiful as that is, I wanted more for that character. I wanted the end of his arc to be, your choices matter and you can change. What I want does not matter. It's not my story. I just want maybe the lesson of that his choices and his attempt to change mattered to actually have some sort of bearing on the end.
Cersei got a really very wonderful ending for someone who was so terrible. To be like 100% honest. Like
she got
for
the
someone
very
who was
poetic.
really a POS, like responsible for numerous murders,
Blew up the Sept.
blew up the Sept, killing untold thousands of people and innocent people outside on the whole hill, is a bad person. She got a really, really wonderful, soft ending in the arms of the man she loves.
Let's talk a
cheated
little bit
on
about a person who got a hard ending.
Never forget Lancel.
Because Tyrion sees this, Arya and Jon chat a little bit after they bump into each other, and then we get Dany's victory rally.
Yeah.
So
General Hux.
one of the most complicated choices that they've made this season is essentially to deviate from Daenerys as a point of view character. Now, point of view character is obviously super important in the books. Like all the books are written from different characters' points of view. But I'm talking about offering the character on the show moments of interiority.
Yeah.
Outside of the quick second on top of Drogon when she hears the bells going off.
Right.
Letting us see what is she thinking in between the times Jon sees her or the times Tyrion sees her. What is she thinking? What is she doing? And it was a crucial decision, and I don't know why they made it necessarily. I don't know why we got certain things that we did get and didn't get more into what's going on in Dany's head. Maybe that's a fool's errand to try and show what's going on inside Dany's head, but the character we see in this episode is much different than the one we saw in the last episode and is much different than the one we saw at the Battle for Winterfell. So let's take this opportunity to talk about Dany generally, but also that scene, that rally.
You know, this is something we talked about in the latest binge mode, is that clearly by showing the effects of her attack in detail before we ever see her, they're just priming us to think of her as the enemy now, the other now. And that is really a jarring thing to happen when this is a character that, as you say, has been a POV character and a prime one, like a central one, like top two most important characters in the story until now. And then really in the moments, ever since the bell rung, we have no access to what she's thinking until she gets on the destroyed steps of the Red Keep and is like, we're taking this party all around the world, which is a lot of mission creep for someone who spent her entire life being like, it's Westeros, it's the Iron Throne, that's what I want.
And is really throwing some high heat when she's like, and Winterfell.
It's jarring. It's jarring, and at the same time, I thought, man, Emilia Clarke really killed it in these moments. Like she was
absolutely
unbelievable.
Yeah,
she was great. Man, again, like really powerful, sincerely gripping and powerful in the moment. I needed 3 to 4 more hours to get us there. And I think that the way you just framed it is like basically perfect. Yeah. We stopped seeing the world through Dany's eyes. And how can we understand the world she wants to build if we don't have access to that anymore? You know, and we're not supposed to understand it anymore. I mean, that's part of the point, but we are only now seeing her, a character whose mind and heart and soul we've inhabited for 8 seasons of this television show, as somebody other people are afraid of. Yeah. And that's pretty daunting.
I'm struck by how kind of similar her mission is to what she's always had, but now Tyrion and other people are just against it. And part of that is the formulation, well, she killed this entire city. That was another thing that's like, well, if you stack up all the bodies that so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so did, it still doesn't count for everything that Dany did.
Tyrion says that to Jon in the next
that's
scene.
just like I don't know, a really rough formulation for me to be like, well, who killed more?
I mean, again, like, we talked a lot on Binge Mode last week about having to hold 2 truths in our mind simultaneously at once, and how they both carry weight. You know, it was season 4 when Dany said they can live in my new world or they can die in their old one. That's what this was. Yeah. This was foreshadowed. This has been there the whole time, but. You know, you mentioned how we didn't see her as she was raining fire down in the Bells, and that idea, you know, Zach Cram and others on The Ringer and elsewhere have talked about this, the power on the one hand of the symbolism of her becoming the dragon, and us having to associate with the people who she was destroying. My thing is that they owed it to us to show us Dany's face. We deserve to understand what that character is thinking and feeling. So we got that in this episode, and it was like unbelievably disturbing because there was not a shred of remorse. And while again, I think this is where this is heading in the books. I thought that Dany as Queen of the Ashes was where things were heading on the show. I'm not actually objecting to the ultimate choice. I don't.
Forget fandom. Forget whether or not you wanted her to sit on the Iron Throne or whatever.
I don't understand though how
return on investment.
But I don't understand how the gentle heart that was there for so long vanished entirely. You know that.
There's something that struck me as really weird. So Jon encounters, you know, Grey Worm and his soldiers about to do in the Lannisters. Goes to talk to Dany. Do you know what they're doing? They're executing Lannisters down there. And she's like, well, you know, it has to happen. And never really is like. And also, you killed like 1 million people with your dragon. Can we talk about it? Like, it's just, of course she's not going to care about the Lannister soldiers, but like, we are asked to believe that Dany has turned because she has vaporized this entire city and its civilian inhabitants. And then nobody really challenges her to her face about it. Yeah. They ask her about the soldiers, which, listen, like, she's not, if she killed the people, she's not going to be like, yeah, let the soldiers go. So why aren't we asking about all these people, which were the price of Dany turning into a villain?
Right. Well, so even if we don't get that interiority with Dany, in some ways, Tyrion tries to fill in those blanks in the next scene when he's in prison with Jon. So I don't know if you had another point about Dany, if it ties into that, but I mean,
it does. I was thinking of the Tyrion-Dany exchange last episode when Tyrion goes and rats out Varys, basically.
His best friend.
Famously best friends.
So close.
Best buds, as we keep hearing.
They were good friends.
Me and him, we took a...
Go to Vegas every other weekend.
We toured minor league baseball parks all through the summer.
They were so close. They did a lot of stuff together all the time.
Oh man, that's anyway. And Tyrion was trying to rationalize why he needs to know, why Varys needs to know, why they're there to help, that they want the same thing. And he has that moment where he realizes, well, she's gonna kill this guy. And he says, it doesn't matter now. And Dany says, no, it doesn't matter now. And that has ultimately become a meta narrative on where we are with Dany's character in the season. the choices that they made
Jon
in the
tries
last
to
couple
pull it
episodes.
doesn't matter now on Tyrion.
Yes.
Yeah, but, you know, it does matter.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Of course it matters. I mean, that is an inescapable fact of the story, is that every decision, what's the Bran line to Theon, you know? Everything you did brought you here, where you are.
Brought you here.
We're going to talk about how we got there with Bran. Yeah.
So their choices do matter. But
So they have this conversation. It
Yeah.
goes back and forth. Tyrion seems to be saying, the fact that you know what you have to do is why, basically, you are who you are.
and Arya
Yeah.
warned Jon
Right.
as well.
I thought honestly the most profound, not profound, but the moment that caught my ear was when he said, "You're the shield."
Yeah.
You're the
Yeah.
shield, and it was that idea of actually like a protector that maybe like Dany never quite grasped or never quite filled that role of her many titles.
I was struck by, I like that scene a lot. And it was that thing of like holding two truths in your mind at once. On the one hand, I thought I loved that scene. On the other hand, it was like, again, where it was like, Jon really gets talked into doing a lot of things. And I think we need to like remember, as Tyrion and Jon look out over the city of Ash, what Tyrion's and Jon's plan was for taking the city. They're very upset because, like, Dany just killed 1 million people, and we shouldn't forget that. It was awful. Tyrion's plan was
Starve him.
starve them.
Yeah. And
All
Jon,
those-
and
all
Jon
those-
sanctioned it.
Yeah. Their plan was cut off the food supply, right? People will watch their children waste away, starve to death in their arms. That will make them so mad that they will then, hopefully, we hope, after a certain
Revolt.
number of thousands of children and weak people die, they will then, hopefully, take up arms, attack the Red Keep, the Lannister forces. Surely many of those civilians will die. And then hopefully, through that process, we will bloodlessly gain the throne. And that is degrees better than attacking the city in force.
Yes.
Is it? I don't know, but that should be thought about.
This is such a good point. And one of the things I liked about the end stage of the story is being reminded time and time again that maybe he's not as good as it, but Tyrion is Tywin's son.
Yeah.
A through line of the conversations between Tyrion and Varys, and in that conversation with Tyrion and Jon, and in many others, what's the difference? Control.
Yeah.
Not the outcome. It's just about whether they are actually able to make sure that Dany listens to them
Yes.
the way that Tywin once stood there with Tommen and said, what makes a good king? Wisdom to listen to your counselors.
And that's the more
When they
nefarious.
lose that, that's when they give up.
That's the more nefarious read to Tyrion's incredibly impassioned speech in favor of Bran.
Oh my God.
Here's a guy I can control.
Sure.
Like, that's the other way to look at it.
We'll get to that. Let's quickly talk about, well, not quickly, let's talk about Jon killing Dany. So
Let's.
he goes up to her, he first sees Drogon, Drogon gives him a sniff.
Drogon wants a nap.
That's so a really fun moment in watching this. Let you peek behind the curtain. We're sitting there watching the devastation of King's Landing pass before our eyes, and then Drogon comes out from under the
Shakes on the
ash
snow a little.
berm, and we're just like, oh, little baby.
Sniff
I know, it's so funny. You guys are like,
He needs a nap.
Sleepy.
tired.
Drogon takes
He's
a
been
sniff
working
at Jon.
hard.
Jon goes into the Red Keep. They have this conversation.
Where's my Queen's Guard?
Not a great. Where's
Out
her?
murdering people.
Yeah.
Like,
So he goes in there. They have this conversation. He says at the
Well,
end,
before that, we have Dany alone in the throne room.
touching the throne.
This is the House of the Undying vision from season 2 come to our screens at long last. Crucially, in the House of the Undying, she never actually touched the edge of the throne. She reached out for it, and that was when she was pulled away into another vision. I was like, oh my God, is she never going to touch it? But that vision was the last one on our checklist of things that we knew were coming and hadn't seen, and the question was always, again, how we got there, not whether we were going to. And to see Dany with the throne room, the walls blasted away, her at the seat of her power, at her birthright, the thing that has driven her and that has, in many cases, completely blinded her to her better nature. Destruction. That's what she actually won. Despair, chaos. She's smiling.
Yeah, and
She's
she doesn't
happy.
spare a single thought to being like, well, here's how I'll govern. Here's how I'll unite the people behind me. Here's how we'll figure this out. It's all about freeing people from tyrants, breaking the wheel, and anyone who doesn't go along with my plan gets smushed. And was there a line, basically, it doesn't even have to be a specific line, but was there a moment in Jon and Dany's exchange where you're like, I know what's happening here?
Oh, the whole
The second he
time.
walked in the room.
The second he walked in the room, that over-the-shoulder shot as she's...
And he didn't walk in and say, this Tyrion guy is killing you
hey.
on Twitter, man. I mean, really,
Yeah.
there's so many hashtags going right now.
Or even like, hey, my queen, you did it.
Yeah.
Congrats.
It was when she basically said, you know, we decide. I decide what's good and who's right. It was like very much I'm trying to find a quote here that I want to reference.
Should I just vamp?
Yeah, talk for 2 seconds.
Should we talk the Thrones?
While I look for this, because I want to
Guys,
reference it.
The Raptors, you know.
I'm on the wrong doc. That explains it. So
Hashtag
many
Talk to
docs,
Thrones
guys.
if you guys want to reach out, questions, comments,
I got it.
concerns.
Keep
No,
going.
absolutely.
Keep teasing it. It's the Lord of the Rings idea, and there was so
yeah.
much
there was a lot
Lord
of
of the Rings in this episode. I mean, Jon's eventual sailing off is literally like almost a shot-for-shot remake of Frodo sailing to the Grey Havens. But what's like one of the most signature lines, not only in Lord of the Rings, but in all of stories? It's Gandalf saying to Frodo, many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them, Frodo? Then do not be too eager to deal out death and judgment. Even the wise cannot see all ends.
My favorite line of Lord
Dany
of the
thinks
Rings
she can.
is when Sam is like, this bread is awesome. Thanks. Just kidding.
Gets them all the way up those stairs.
That was a moment that I think, obviously, in some ways, ended the series. In some ways, like that moment, that closing,
Yes.
it ended a version of this story. And you know, we've talked a lot over the last few weeks about how shows end, how stories end, and I would never want that to be the final scene of Game of Thrones, but it certainly marks the end tonally of a certain kind of episode, because after Drogon melts the throne, which I thought was a pretty interesting thing, and we can get into proprietary dragon rules and what's going on there, but him picking Dany up and flying east, I assume,
Back to Valyria.
was like, that's it.
Yeah.
Now it's over. And it was
devastating.
telling that I wasn't like, man, Jon's gonna have to really watch out because Grey Worm's gonna be so pissed off. And like, it was like, yeah, this is the end. And then we get the city council meeting from hell. Not even from hell, but it was like a more random collection of characters you could never have drawn up in like if you just had like a lottery machine of all of the Game of Thrones characters about who's going to be sitting around making.
Oh my God! Shouts to the POD.
The Prince of Dorne.
We got the POD finally. The Prince of Dorne.
Robin going through the David Robinson growth spurt while Tyrion's in jail. I mean, it was
and all
amazing.
without the access to that steady supply of breast milk that had been nurturing him for so long. Amazing.
So, we have this basically a council meeting. Now, do you want to talk about like the history of this? Because Jason, obviously, with the Higher Mysteries, goes into sort of depth and context and history of some of the stuff we're seeing. And do you want to talk a little bit about?
Sure, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So this kind of format for deciding who is going to rule Westeros has been used before, always when matters of succession were pretty thorny. The first one was in 101 AC after Prince Balon's death. King Jaehaerys' son and heir, Prince Aemon, died in 92. Things got extremely knotty. Basically, what happens is all the lords and ladies of the realm are summoned to King's Landing in order to decide what will happen. Now, the first one ended up having to be held in Harrenhal, but just because so many people showed up, it was held for 13 days. Eventually, they managed to find a ruler, but like these are things that have been done in the past, but they never really bode well. It's kind of like the fault lines are being unveiled when you have to do this.
I almost wanted more episodes of this show just to prove the hubris of them being like, when there's like, well, maybe everybody should choose, maybe basically we should have a democracy, a representative democracy, and like they just start scoffing at that. I was like, man, it would be great to see like the next episode when that kind of comes back to bite them.
I mean, that's the thing I'm thinking about when I was watching this council meeting being held. first of all, the North gets to secede, which is great for them. Very interesting that Dorne, who held out the longest
POD.
after the POD,
he's good with it.
After Aegon, so when Aegon conquered the realm, Dorne wasn't brought in for over 100 years.
Yeah.
They managed to hold out for quite a long time and won a number of concessions, including the ability to name themselves, to style themselves princes of Dorne. So it's very interesting that Dorne was like, okay, our leadership has basically been decimated by the various wars that have gone on throughout in Westeros. But now that the North is seceded, we're going to stay in. We're cool with it. That's interesting, and I would not expect that to hold going forward.
Yeah, I mean, we've got Edmure there, we've got Brienne there, we've got Sam.
Edmure!
What a showing from Edmure.
And all these different sort of characters in there, and you know, it gets a little gnarly at one point.
Yeah.
Arya threatens to kill Yara.
You don't want that. It's not what you want.
No, I go the other way with it. We needed a lot more moments like that.
Yeah.
Oh.
We needed more than 45 seconds for all the great lords of the realm to come to this newfound understanding, except I guess we didn't because it's not really a new understanding,
Right.
aside from the fact that the North has broken off into its own kingdom. So there's an election.
But they weren't called to do that.
There's a king.
But is
What
he a
were they
king?
called to do? To agree on what the price would be for Jon and Tyrion's freedom? Like,
It's essentially like it seemed like the discussion
Yes.
initially was what happens to Jon.
And Tyrion.
And
Tyrion was
because the North's
the man who
army is
ended up
outside
running the
walls.
meeting.
Right, yeah.
Tyrion went from being in detention to teaching the class
Yeah.
within the span of 30 seconds, which in some ways feels very true to his character, but again, like, how did all those people get there? What was the understanding when they came? What stake did they think that they would have?
Right.
How did everybody just accept instantly that we were going from, in essence, doling out punishment for two traitors or not, depending on your point of view in that moment, to where we wound up in the span of moments?
Yeah, and what was, I mean, it was just a little confusing in the moment because I'm like, well, what do the Unsullied want to do here? Like,
Well-
are they just going to hold King's Landing until they are
Yeah,
satisfied?
like what's there in Grey Worm being like, oh, okay, like Tyrion is not only arguing for Jon's freedom and life, but then is going to name the king. And then Grey Worm's just like, cool, okay, I'm not going to argue with this until the very end.
Grey Worm not arguing is just as strange as Grey Worm having any say in the first place.
Yeah.
Like, I guess, sure, it's a suddenly shockingly large army again. I don't know what
Unsullied,
happened
yeah.
to
Yeah.
Distressingly Even, just thousands and thousands of Unsullied and Dothraki again. But why was anybody content to let them take control for even a moment?
Yeah.
I don't understand how any of that happened. I don't understand what the pretense was for Sansa, other than, of course, the fact that Jon, his life is presumably on the line and they care. Why did she go there? You know,
Yeah.
she's on the record.
Yeah.
Like,
As not
time
wanting
and
to go.
time again, I don't want anyone in my family going down there. I don't want to go down there. She sent Brienne to the Dragon Pit as an envoy in season 7. All of them are there, and that's fine, but how did they get there? Why did they make those choices? What are they after? Sam is sitting there, presumably as a representative of Horn Hill and the Reach.
No, the Reach is depopulated
Except
now.
we just heard that there's nobody in the Reach, and by
they're
the
about
end
to
of the
give it to the
episode, Sam
Unsullied,
is
yeah.
Grand Maester. That all happens in 30 minutes.
Yeah.
How?
That was a wild. So the Unsullied are basically offered the ability to settle the Reach because no one is there anymore.
Right.
Leading to the conclusion that the Lannister army just like committed a genocide in the Reach, like everybody's dead.
It was a pretty interesting little
Couldn't
move
bear to
there.
live without Olenna.
But I think that
guess.
was obviously the tonal shift in the episode, and you start to get the compression. So you get the compression of everything that's happened while Tyrion's been in prison. He comes out, he negotiates Bran's election, essentially.
Wild.
And I guess, you know, we talked a little bit about that before, but
Astonishing stuff.
can either of you make the case for Bran as king? Not as I predicted it, but this is why it makes sense.
Did not predict it.
It makes sense because he will be because of his responsibilities as Three-Eyed Raven, which I
we
would
still
add,
don't necessarily know.
we know nothing about.
Yeah.
Bran will be often indisposed as leader of Westeros. Therefore, people like Tyrion, who have loved being close to power his whole life, get to
do all the stuff he actually wants to do.
Get to effectively administer the realm.
Which is like public
in Bran's name. So that's, I would argue it this way. Bran offers the opportunity for ambitious, power-hungry people to rule in the name of a weak king.
It's interesting that is actually how the series ends.
Yes.
Is Bran saying, I'm going to go find a dragon. You guys handle building brothels, fixing ships, building clean water, all that stuff.
The answer to your question is no. There's not a way to make it make sense. At least not this version and this timeline of the show. I think that book Bran and show Bran for a lot of people probably has the biggest chasm now between how you feel about the character. Like book Bran is, I could definitely see book Bran ending up in some sort of position of leadership. And I think, when
show Bran is selling dream catchers at a craft fair.
So there are a lot of factors at play here. Like, okay, when Arya killed the Night King, my dad, hi dad, texted me and said, Arya and Bran, I've been calling it since episode 1. And he had been, because I think for like...
Mr. Rubin.
Wow, Barry Rubin keep crushing it!
Did he put any money on that at Westgate or something?
I don't know. I mean, of course, that's the other thing, is that Bran was a Vegas odds favorite heading into the season, which was distressing. But I bring that up to say that Bran and Arya are some of the characters who best represent one of the key ideas of the story, which we hear Tyrion voice in season 1, tender spot in my heart for cripples, bastards, and broken things.
Sure.
The people, and Jon too, of course, people who didn't necessarily have a place in the world. And you couple that idea with something like the conversation between Luwin and Bran about how, which child wouldn't want to believe that they were special, and how Bran really was, and allowed us as people consuming the story to think, just a regular person in the world, could do something incredible. Bran is a very quintessential fantasy character. So in that sense, yes. However, what do we know about show Bran? There's one thing that we know definitively, which is that he is basically not a person anymore. And all he has said is, I'm not really, meaning not Bran Stark, not somebody who wants, not somebody who thinks he's going to be wants to be or should be Lord of Winterfell. So to jump from that in the span of mere episodes to ruler and protector of the realm is confounding to me.
I will go one step further. And I'm really not trying to get too nitpicky here, but since his go-to response for any piece of dialogue is, this is the way it was always going to be, or you did exactly what you were always going to do.
That's a great point.
All this stuff is and then at the very end, what does he say? I'm going to go find this dragon, presumably through his warging powers, because he's probably not going to physically track it down. What was the cost of him taking this throne?
He also says, when they elect him, of course I knew this would happen. This is why I came here.
Come on!
Always knew it was going to be 73 episodes.
But if that's the case, then you read all the stuff that he's done leading up to that, I'm like, come on.
Right, okay. This is, again, the two truths thing.
Yeah.
Bran, the character, the core of his character, yes, it makes sense. The Bran on the show that we have, it just doesn't track. And it doesn't mean it couldn't. It doesn't mean it couldn't, but we needed a lot more time. And for the time that we had with that character to have gone differently, I think the moments where we started to say, oh my God, are they leaning toward a Bran ending here? It was twofold. It was one, the Vegas odds, which were just weird. And to the point where it was like, do they know something here? And two, the fact that we kept getting conversations about Jon and the ideal ruler being one who doesn't want, juxtaposed against Bran saying, I don't really want. That was deliberate. It was foreshadowing this. But I think your point about the powers, I want to raise another point, which is...
This is what I was kind of getting to. We're in Ravenscroll, and we're going to get back to the episode scene by scene. There's only a couple more scenes, and they're mostly character coded, so I wanted Mal to get to this part.
We talk a lot about choice and destiny.
They talk a lot about choice and destiny in this episode.
And yet, despite the amount of time spent on that, do you as a consumer of the show find yourself in a position to be able to reconcile where they landed? In a show that is often positioned as being about choice and about the folly of believing in your own destiny. Most of the dead characters are the one who said, that prophecy is about me,
It's about me. I knew it.
Stannis.
The characters who...
Stannis might still be alive,
I saw
Cersei, even Dany, the characters who had the courage to stand up and say, I'm going to try to do something different even if it's hard. That idea about doing something right even if it's really, really hard. Jon, in other words, and plenty of other people, Arya, Sansa.
Right.
The person who's in charge of them knows everything.
Or purports to.
And says, and makes it seem at least, that it's all just a roadmap.
That's
Your
right.
life has been laid out for you.
Tyrion was very eager to cast aside Dany because she was presenting herself as a figure of destiny, and now is quite eager to hitch his wagon to another person who is presenting himself as a figure of destiny.
Absolutely. I mean, he basically presents, what's the line about paradise that he says about Dany, where he's like, oh, well, now she's got her,
Who wouldn't she kill to bring that version of paradise into existence?
This isn't I mean, like, you could make the argument, and I'm not trying to, like, get hot under the collar about it, but it is kind of confounding, where it's like, Bran is now all of a sudden like, I'll go find that dragon. Couldn't you have found that dragon 6 weeks ago before everybody died?
We don't know the answer to that question. And that is almost the bigger problem than what the answer actually is.
It's a crucial, and it's the thing we talked about a million times on Binge Mode, is
my heart is pounding now, getting mad.
An inability or an unwillingness to like really, really engage with the fantasy elements, because what's important about that kind of world building is explaining how it works. There has to be an understanding about how the rules work, or else what you get is like a Deus Ex Machina where a character can just do anything.
This is the whole leveling out Dany.
And now with Bran as ruler, it is really devastating to not know how his powers work.
Right.
Or what he even views as his responsibility. Right. You know, we spent so much time heading into this season talking about the role of the Three-Eyed Raven, and we ended up getting a single line, heading into the Battle of Winterfell, the planning for it, about how he was the protector of the world's memory. Okay, so on the one hand, the idea of somebody in charge, and Tyrion obviously tried to voice this a couple times, who has an understanding of history and thus an understanding of mistakes, and thus, by extension, logically, hopefully, how to avoid them. Okay, my thing is more, does Bran know the future?
Right.
Because I think there is ample canonical evidence that the answer to that question is yes.
Yeah.
You know, and before even he trained to be the Three-Eyed Raven, Bran is a green seer. He saw the sea come to Winterfell. That was Theon. He says out loud, my dreams come true. He saw the shadow of the dragon over the roofs of King's Landing. He saw the throne room ruins. So I don't want the person in charge of my life to know my future, because then nothing that I do matters. Or it's all just about positioning me to get there. And that's even like with Arya. I think we all really were very pro Arya being the one who killed the Night King.
Absolutely.
But that was that nagging question in the back of our minds. Well, was she always going to, because Bran handed her the dagger?
Right.
You know?
Well, and then you just get on, and you get down to what we were talking about at the beginning of the episode, is that one of the most beloved episodes in this entire series is Winds of Winter. It's where, you know, we learn so much about Jon, and there's never really a moment where that, regardless of whether or not Bran can express himself emotionally or not, there's not actually ever like, your story was important to this ending because blank.
Let's talk.
And that's the next scene, is essentially like Jon gets farmed out to the Night's Watch.
I mean, we should talk about, I think the way they present that final scene with Bran as king, with his small council, I think that is really illustrative in miniature of the way Bran is positioned within the series, and kind of like the flaws, if you want to say, of how this storyline finished. And which is why I think a more charitable reading of this is really like Tyrion running the realm via a weak king.
And you could make an argument that the way he's like worried about the chair is
because
very much like
Tyrion comes in is very...
That ultimately doesn't account for Bran saying, yeah, it's me, your boy.
I agree.
Like, that doesn't make sense.
I agree with you, but I think look at the way that scene plays out. It starts with Tyrion positioning the chairs, right? Obviously, like a metaphor for him tweaking and controlling the realm.
Well, and a callback to many moments where he and Cersei were rearranging the chairs.
And the small council comes in. They talk about stuff. Bran comes in for 2 seconds, blah, 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 I'll look for the dragon, I'm out. And then we get that scene of them haggling about coins and chips and stuff, and that soft pullback as if, and what are we left with? This is where the realm is going to be controlled from. This is what the governance is going to be like, kind of as it always was.
Yep.
And Bran is not going to be involved. He went away. to go do Bran stuff.
Here's my counterpoint to that. Then just give us that honest version of the story, because Tyrion has never had a problem ever saying, I'm actually the smartest one in the room.
Right, and
he used to say, I'm new to strategy, but like I find I have a taste for it. And now, what is he saying in this episode? Don't listen to me, actually. I just keep making bad choices. But
and
actually,
he says you
here's
can make up for your mistakes by serving as the hand of the king for the rest of your life. The thing that I wanted, though, was an exchange when Tyrion and Jon see each other before Jon goes to the Night's Watch, is this idea of like, okay, so then what was the transaction here then?
Right.
You're the hand of the king now, and I'm never gonna have a wife, and I go back up to the north. Which, honestly, if Tormund hadn't been like, this is where you'd love to retire.
For doing the thing that you convinced me to do, by the way.
It was
you told me to do it.
Told me it was my destiny to, because I was the version of my sitting on the Iron Throne was the thing that Daenerys had always promised. This benevolent person who was gonna try and protect people. And they don't even discuss it. He's like, God, I'm
that's why
I'm finally off duty.
I just have a feeling like on multiple watches, Tyrion's end is going to be a lot more complex, I think, than on first Blanche.
Okay.
Because
he fesses up to loving Dany.
Yeah.
He basically says it. Yeah, finally.
You're
Not
more
as successfully, which is quite funny.
So what we get otherwise is a series of character codas.
Yeah.
Brienne writes Jaime's story
in the Book of Brothers. That hit me, I will say.
But it was also interesting to think about.
Like
that's how Jaime will be remembered, right?
I liked it, but it's like, listen, just on a basic human level, what would your ex, who you left, write about you on anything? Like, it's great that she wrote all the nice stuff, but it's kind of also rings a little false that she wasn't like, N was an asshole who left me like blah, 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 blah.
I don't agree. I think that ultimately Brienne is one of the characters in the entire story who we can look to as like somebody who really understands who she is and that we can find a lot there to admire. And that's why it made me so mad when people after episode 4 were like, oh my God, they just like reduced Brienne to a sad lady crying because her boyfriend left. No, I know you didn't think that at all, but you can be a strong woman and you can have emotion, just like she could be devastated that Jaime loved her and still want to honor her sacred principle, which is nothing's more hateful than failing to protect the one you love, and she's protecting Jaime's legacy there. That's an idea that she holds sacred.
It's like, I would have liked some emotion from Brienne in that moment, I guess. It's, it's that thing of like, she can be both strong and also like pissed that this happened. And instead she's just gonna be like, yeah, I'll write his history, fine.
So Brienne writes
I did find
Jaime's
myself
story.
wondering, well, okay, so Brienne is clearly Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, which is great, but what about Sansa? So that means Brienne's in King's Landing.
She is still
She's
protecting
not,
Cat Stark's children, I guess. But that's not really her oath, right?
Again, it's just, like there's no conversation. I'd love to see the conversation between Brienne and Sansa where they decide that they're not going to actually reign together. Sansa probably needs a guard too.
So what else do we have? Sansa is the Queen of the North. Arya goes west to find out what's west of Westeros.
Hint, nothing.
Jon
Sunset Sea.
returns to the Wall.
Go
sees
see.
Tormund, sees Ghost.
Incredible moment.
Happy
with
reunion.
Ghost.
We've got
That
our
was
little
great. That
small,
was great.
the little council meeting where they discuss different public works to do.
Yeah.
And then there's a montage of the Stark children, essentially, people saluting Sansa with that dope crown.
That was incredible.
That was
the crown was
incredible.
incredible.
Arya
Wolf,
amazing.
sailing west.
Sansa being crowned Queen
And
of the
Jon
North.
riding out, I assume, to escort the wildlings back out to their homelands. It almost feels like he's with them, and that's it. That's the end of the show.
Yeah, that was a very interesting. So Jon is going to leave the Night's Watch again?
Well,
I mean, he's rangering, I guess. Right?
I guess?
Yeah.
Sure.
It was definitely, I think, deliberately open to interpretation.
Yes.
He maybe no line in the episode better summed up the they'll figure it out nature of this episode and the season than Tyrion saying our new king has chosen to send you to the Night's Watch. Jon saying there's still a Night's Watch.
Yeah.
And Tyrion saying the world will always need a home for bastards and broken men. Okay, again, on the one hand, there's an idea that's very central to the show. On the other hand, literally, why is the Night's Watch there?
Right.
I was waiting for some sort of final hint of a White Walker or something.
I found that line fascinating because a lot of the tension in between Jon and Tyrion in season 1 is Jon's naivety in believing that the Night's Watch was this noble profession standing between the realms of men and wildlings and evil, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And Tyrion being like, it's all criminals, man. What are you talking about? These are all losers and criminals and rapists and have fun with your new friends.
Right.
And now is essentially just straight up being like, listen, we're always going to need a place to throw the trash. Head north.
Yeah, it's complicated. I do like the callback to one of the formative Tyrion-Jon moments, and really one of the formative moments for the series, which is the wear it like armor exchange. You know, let me give you some advice, bastard. Never forget what you are. The rest of the world will not. Wear it like armor, and it can never be used to hurt you.
Yeah.
That's I'm getting emotional because that's such a powerful idea.
Yeah, of course.
And that's why I wanted Jon to make that choice to say, this is who I am, or much like Jaime, this is what I think I deserve.
Yes.
Like, what do we deserve? Why do our choices matter?
But do you feel like you got robbed of that?
I think
I wanted him to make that choice. I think it's a much more powerful ending if he is saying,
rather than it's like a plea deal.
I would go a little bit further in that, like, just as the lack of access to the interiority, to Daenerys' interiority, it's a very similar thing happened with Jon almost throughout the whole season. We don't get a lot of
very little Jon.
Very little Jon, and then in
so
this
much Tyrion.
And in this decisive moment, he actually doesn't make any decisions. It's Tyrion who pushes him to do this. It's Bran who sends him to the wall. We don't he's left asking in some of the last lines he speaks, did I do the right thing? What did I do?
It doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, and so we really are left with an absolute vacuum as to what Jon thinks and believes and decided on.
Well, it turns out that they're, like, in some ways, Jon and Dany's stories were dependent on each other. And in some ways, his killing her, like, it almost evaporates both of their stories. And he was carried away by a dragon in some ways as well. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really nice way of putting it. I mean, the Aemon connection, again, I think is very present consistently throughout the season. And Aemon...
You just remind people who Aemon is, because I think, like, that is huge.
Yes, Maester Aemon.
Who we
oldest
saw
man in the realm.
Yeah, and we saw on this show.
Maester of the Night's Watch. He was there for the first
four seasons.
5 seasons. He dies midway through the show's run.
Could have been a Targaryen king, but passed it on to his
Egg.
His little brother Aegon, who then died at Summerhall. It was the blood of the dragon.
He eulogizes the fallen soldiers of the Night's Watch at the end of season 4, and that eulogy is basically what Jon borrows from when he's eulogizing after the Battle of Winterfell, which was one of those, oh my God, they're really setting up this parallel. But again, Aemon chose to walk away from the throne. He chose to walk away from other people saying to him, think about this.
Yeah, right.
And to remove himself from power, and that's why those moments when he was asking Jon about, or telling him that you're gonna have to make this choice one day, you make that choice and live with it for the rest of your days, as I have, was so powerful and haunting. And he explained to Jon how he had been tested. You know, that's the thing. Jon's not dead. There are gonna be moments the rest of his life that test this pledge, and that's why if it had been a pledge as opposed to a punishment, it would be all the more powerful.
I mean, like, it is not lost on me that there's a dragon still out there.
Yeah.
There's
Drogon.
There's
flying
Jon Snow wandering north, but not dead and not on the throne. Like, I don't think that there is like a sequel in the works per se, but there are enough threads out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, again, to call back to what I said earlier in the Raven Scroll, the issues with Jon have not gone away because Dany is dead. In fact, they are more pressing.
Right.
Jon has a better claim to the throne than Bran the Broken.
Yeah.
If Jon was like, actually, this Night's Watch thing is not doing it for me, like
And Bran the Broken won't have any heirs, as Tyrion says.
Right.
There would be many people who would be like, actually, wait, hold on. Jon? It's actually kind of weird that Sam isn't like, oh, Sam, who very recently was like, you are the true king.
And traveled all the way to the other end of the country to be like, guess what?
It is you.
Yeah.
So
Sam was very busy with that aggressive maester training in about 3 weeks.
right, so all those issues with Jon being a focus point for disaffected lords and nobles who perhaps want their own path to power by supporting Jon's very, very good claim, as we have been told numerous times throughout this season, to the throne, that still exists.
Yeah.
Jon ending up back at the Wall is perfect.
I know. We said this about so many different
There's
things.
a clear theme here.
Yeah.
The actual end place is very fitting and very right. How we got there is a little fraught. Like there's this quote in the first book when Jon is at the wall and has been there for a little while, but not for a ton of time. And he's thinking about the rest of the world. You know, all the places Jon would never see. The world was down that road, and he was here.
Yeah.
Like, that's his life now.
Yeah. Let's talk about who we lost on this episode. It was only one person,
man.
but it was a pretty crucial one.
person.
So we're gonna just run a quick in memoriam video for Daenerys Targaryen. JC, take us out. Take Dany out here.
Oh, Dany, you birthed dragons and magic back into the world. You were a hero to millions, to the millions who named their real-life children after you. You freed slaves in Slaver's Bay. You brought the Dothraki to heel and got them to cross the poisoned water for the first time in their history. Crucified some guys. They kind of deserve it. I would say yes. And, you know, got kind of a raw deal. Your advisors weren't that great. And in the end, you went bad and were killed by the man you love. Dany, you deserve better, but this is the end that you got. We salute you. Daenerys Targaryen, the Stormborn, the Mother of Dragons, Khaleesi of the Great Grass Sea, Breaker of Chains, Burner of Cities.
I'm
Goodbye.
just glad Jorah wasn't around to see it.
Jorah would have been distraught.
It wouldn't have happened.
It wouldn't have happened.
It would not have happened if Jorah had still been there.
Jorah and Barristan.
What happens to the Dothraki?
That's a great question. They get to roam.
Did you see Jon walked right by one of those guys?
I think the intimation is that Grey Worm is taking them with him. Right?
Okay.
I think that was the suggestion, because why else would Dothraki without horses be walking around on a dock by the poisoned water?
So,
that said,
what?
Yeah.
They're going from.
Listen,
it took Dany, the stallion who mounts the world, to get them to cross the poisoned water to now let's sail to an island?
It just seemed like that was what was being suggested because, honestly, the other outcome, which is a horde of several thousand, somehow still, Dothraki being allowed to roam Westeros.
That's not happening.
Doing Dothraki stuff.
Maybe they get the reach.
Well, I mean, it would become a wasteland. Like, to just let them roam free without a leader, like, and go back to their old ways would be a disaster for Westeros.
I was like, do they get a new call?
Go back to the Mother of Mountains. Go back to the womb of the world. Go back to your actual home. Like, I think that again would have been a pretty powerful thing to lean into at the end. Is people, and not in a way that feels contrary to the message of being able to explore new things and find a new way of life.
Certainly Arya does that,
Yeah, but where do you actually belong? Where do you want to be? The Dothraki, they don't want to be in Westeros. They follow Dany because they follow strength, and because Dany burned all the other calls. But what do they want? It would be nice to have a moment where we try to find out.
Behind Jon.
Yeah.
Sure.
Let's do our Fire and Ice Winners of the Week presented by Wendy's. You can get a free small Frosty when you order delivery of a Wendy's Spicy Chicken Combo using the promo code HouseWendy's on DoorDash's delivery app. All right. Winner of the week. Who's your winner of the week, Jason?
I'm going to go with the betting odds. Bovada, shouts to you. Before the season dropped, Bran was shockingly high in the odds to be sitting on the throne at the end. Mallory and I were disturbed by it because it was such an out-of-the-box choice that they had to know something, and you know what? They did. Clearly, they did.
Right.
The episode was called The Iron Throne, and I just think that the idea of melting down the Iron Throne was something we talked about a lot heading into the season, and how that really is powerful. I'm like laughing at our own naivete, thinking back to the explainer videos we did before the season, and the one on the field ended with a line that was basically like, forged in the fire of progress. Like, this isn't progress, actually. Not really. They didn't break the wheel, not really. They just sort of recalibrated the wheel and said, we'll figure it out later.
They filled in all the old spokes with nicer guys.
Wheel is not broken.
Yeah.
Wheel is decidedly still spinning, everybody.
Every single form of government that they had at the beginning of the show is still in place.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, even the North breaking off as an independent kingdom, which again, I ride for, and it's a great, Sansa's certainly a winner of Game of Thrones, no doubt about it, but that's still monarchy.
Again, independent kingdom. Bran Stark is the king of Westeros, and he has allowed his family to have freedom. So is the wheel broken, or do the Starks just run everything?
And where did Yara net out there? Because she was the
Yeah,
one who
she had-
initially
she had the
an
deal.
agreement with
She had the
Dany.
deal first, and now she doesn't have the deal. So wheel not broken, wheel spinning.
Very strange. Can I share my winner?
Sure.
It's unbelievable.
I'm
Wait,
so-
hold on. Everybody,
We
just
can
take a
actually
moment.
go like get a drink
Everybody
if you
take
want.
a moment
Yeah.
to guess
Get your
Mallory
fire extinguishers
Rubin's
out. Go ahead.
winner is.
Oh my God. Pull through. This is the last one.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We
it's
got one more
Goose.
show after this. We're gonna do a Thursday finale wrap-up show. But this is it, Mal.
I'm not even gonna do a thing here. I can't. It's Ghost. It's Jon and Ghost for being together again, and it's me and every other fan of the story out there, you two included,
Sure.
who said, why? How could this thing have happened? Chris is like,
don't think
what
I
are you
said that."
talking about? I never care. I thought Ghost had an AirPod in. It was literally a joke he made on the watch. The direwolves, crucial to the story.
Yes.
I should have a stopwatch going that gives me 30 seconds
It's
here.
right there,
Okay,
actually.
I'll watch it. Again, the origin of the entire story, that bond, we didn't get as much of it on the show, but the Starks, the kids are wargs, that powerful magical connection between animal and human, just as powerful as the dragon bond, and Jon and Ghost were always, even though we got summer cam with Bran on the show, Jon and Ghost was always the heart of that.
Yeah.
Because it not only showed us something about magic, it not only showed us something about protection and friendship and companionship, it showed us something about how you could go from feeling alone to going to feel like you were part of a family, like you had a family, like us here. It's so beautiful.
I like blacked
Can I
out for a
just say-
second
can I
and
just-
forgot you were talking about
When they
Olympus.
find Ghost, when they find the direwolves in the books, what do they think? Bran thought it was curious that this pup alone, meaning Ghost, would have opened his eyes while
this
the
is you
others were
not
still
doing a thing.
blind.
Can I
This
just
is me
like-
not doing
can
a
I-
thing. It really matters.
Cersei killed Lady.
Why are you doing
Because should she had not have gotten a worse end, she killed Lady.
Cersei deserved her end. Maybe a worse end. Yeah.
I'm just
but
gonna go with-
Ghost is there. Nymeria out there
Yeah.
roaming in the wild.
Yes,
still in
Nymeria
the-
is
in the
still roaming
Riverlands.
free.
I want to talk a little bit about the loose ends there for a second. My loser of the week, we had one, Edmure Tully.
Oh
Edmure
my
de
God.
Blasio. What's up, my guy? Maybe you gotta pick a different campaign launch. That's all I'm saying. You could have seeded that a little bit more.
Yeah.
You could have maybe just gotten a little groundswell of support among the small council before you stepped up and then got dunked on by Sansa. But I thought that was
That
a
was
great
really
return
funny.
to that character. Where's he been? Where's
He's
he-
been in the poke like under Casterly Rock.
But he
I
wasn't
guess,
at Winterfell. Like, he
Well-
thinks he can come through and be like, actually, you guys, statecraft.
We heard Walder
If you
Frey
want
say,
statecraft,
you know,
it's the
he
guy
was
who's been a prisoner for 4 years.
back in the cell. Yeah, who knows? I guess at some point freed and reunited with his wife, who he had one night with. You know,
Really shot his shot and
shot
and
a
hit
shot
it.
successfully. Has a baby now, doing well. Real like, where was the Black Jack Randall Brutus vibe
Yeah.
from
Yeah,
my man there? You know.
Absolutely. Let's do some final thoughts. Before we get to those, I just want to mention that we're not
Yes.
done. We're going to come back
No.
on Thursday, May 23rd at 12 p.m. Pacific, so that's 3 p.m. Eastern, and we're going to talk a little bit about the series as a whole and what we felt about how they ended it, how they told it, some of our favorite moments from the series, some of our lingering questions. But before we get to that Thursday show, let's talk a little bit about, I don't know, there's a couple of things here that are going to kind of keep me up at night.
Oh yeah.
There's a dragon. There's a weapon of mass destruction, a dragon flying around this world that we have.
Very
so
sweet,
there's,
though.
Where's Drogon?
Right.
Yeah, I
There's-
assume Valeria.
Hey, how come the rightful heir to the throne is just riding north? And what's out there? What's
And
out there?
Did he desert and go ride with
Right.
the Free Folk, or is he just sort of an ambassador now between the Night's Watch and the
Right.
Free Folk?
And then my third and final one is, what's Arya gonna find?
Nothing. She's never. Well, I mean, if history.
She's just gonna keep sailing and then
If history.
see Kyrie Irving and
Listen,
fall off the
a lot
map?
of
Like-
people throughout history have tried to ply the Sunset Seas, including Brandon, the shipwright, King in the North. one of her ancestors went out there, never returned. Many people, including Elisa Farman, who we suspect from Fire and Blood, George's History of the Targaryen Kings, probably is the person who brought the 3 dragon eggs to Essos that Dany was then gifted with, also disappeared. Everybody who goes west, who doesn't turn around, never comes back. So it'll be fascinating to find out what happens.
Arya's gonna make it. And I think that is the #1 candidate for an In the Future spinoff. Not
Is
Jon.
Arya west of Westeros.
Arya's adventures out in the world.
That's the thing
discovering a new part of the known world that had not been known before.
Okay. So Arya's out there in the West. Any other final thoughts before we leave people for tonight?
When does the new war start? Because let's be honest, this is not gonna hold. Like, when Bran dies, you're gonna hold another council? When does Dorne go, wait a second, we want the deal the North got? When do the Iron Islands go, wait a second, we made a deal with Dany that we were gonna be free too, so we're out. When do all the other kingdoms go, actually, yeah, like, we're out too?
But what makes you think Bran wouldn't just say, okay? What is he protecting? What is he invested in?
Sure.
Or would he just be like, you were always going to do that?
And then but okay, so let him do that. And what does that mean? So he's just like leader of a city? Yeah. When does the new war start? And when do the Iron Islanders decide, like, okay, we're just going to start reaving up and down the coast? Who's going to stop us? And literally, who's going to stop us?
Right. And when that war starts or when this conflict arises, wouldn't the last Targaryen be the one to control the dragon?
I would love to know if there are dragon eggs out there. You know, we always talk about Drogon as a he, but dragons, as we understand it, do not have a fixed gender. So maybe Drogon laid eggs back when the original Valyrian excursion occurred, when, you know, we had that amazing shot of Tyrion and Jorah seeing Drogon out in Valyria, or maybe Drogon will lay eggs in the future and dragon eggs could come back into the story. I find myself, to your question of unanswered questions, wondering quite a bit about Samwell Tarly, who weirdly, like, gave us but didn't give us a moment that a lot of us thought we were getting. He put down A Song of Ice and Fire, but was like,
he didn't write
Ebros did it!
Ebros in the Morning wrote it.
Which is incredible. And I don't understand how Sam became a maester that quickly, but mostly, like, what Sam's role in the world is. Gilly is pregnant. You know, that moment, by the way, talk about moments that are more powerful now looking back at them, when Jon is saying goodbye to Sam and Gilly. The despair that sets over him when he realizes, you can see already, he realizes, maybe I will never have a family. And they're having one. Well, does Sam have a family? He's Grand Maester. He's not supposed to have kids, but he and Gilly are having a kid. But that's the thing. Maybe they are just saying, we're relaxing some of these standards, and that would be great.
Then why not relax the John has to go to the wall and not get married standard?
Well, just explain it to us. Like, what is the status of any of that? Is he Lord of Horn Hill? If not, who is? Also, relatedly, speaking of the Reach, Bronn did get Highgarden. That's established now.
Yeah, that's wild.
Bronn does not get Highgarden and then say, yes, I'll head back and serve on your small council as Master of Coin.
Yeah, Master of Coin is a bet.
Absolutely not.
Let me just state,
he's drinking his wine, eating his apples.
Another great.
He did it for the bits.
Whoa. This is actually a great point,
Bran.
because an absolutely outstanding bit of business that will need to be settled is who paying the Iron Bank.
Yes.
They invested a lot of money in Cersei Lannister hiring the Golden Company. Shouts to the Golden Company getting washed 5 seconds into the battle.
No elephants.
Who's on the hook for that money?
This is a great question.
Bronn needs to figure that out, or somebody needs to figure it out.
Bronn.
Somebody.
Isn't Bronn the Master of Coin?
So Bronn.
So we can get
shouts to you. Your job.
Spinoffs include
pay the Iron
Arya
Bank.
and Yara, buddy cop movie on the seas, Bronn CPA.
Bronn removed from power within 2 weeks because he just actually did go ahead and only spend the money on the brothels.
The greatest brothels.
Everyone said he couldn't.
Massive fountains, triple level
testing for the pox. No more poxy horse.
And then there's a question we always wanted to know the answer to, which is like, you know, if there's a cyclical nature to things that are happening in this story, what was the Night King's interest in Jon Snow, and would he possibly find that out there?
I like to think that the answer to that is maybe yes.
Yeah.
That's an exciting thing to think about and hold on to. Jon is going to be ranging, whether he's with the Free Folk or the Night's Watch, whatever the Night's Watch does. Tormund said he had the real North in him, and he did, and that's true. And now he's out there where he knew he belonged, where he does belong, and maybe he can find a little bit more of himself along the way.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna wrap it up there. For Jason and Mallory And for me, I just want to say shout out to everybody who worked on this show this year. It's been the best one we've done so far.
Incredible.
It was an incredible experience working with everybody behind the scenes. We just talked. These guys made it all happen every week. We will be back on Thursday, 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern on Twitter to do our series wrap-up show. But until then, thank you so much for watching Talk the Thrones.